notes. This will be the last page of notes that we take with this unit. So this is B11A. And remember, you can pause this video whenever you need to. So we're taking this video in class, so we're in period, what period is this, 5? Yeah. So 10, 11, 3. It says Unit 5, System Interactions, and we're doing B11A, which you can't see. B11A. Okay, so B11A says you're going to summarize the role of microorganisms. What are microorganisms? Yeah. Okay, you got to use a microscope to see them. Examples? Okay, and that's a very specific example. Bacteria. What else? A few fungi that are microscopic. The vast majority of fungi are going to be multicellular. Plant cells, if you look at individual, now that's within an organism, plant cells, but there are some protists, right? They're single cellular. We didn't get a chance to look at the pond water because, you know, we had that mega freeze, so that wasn't going to work. All the stuff in my pond is pretty much dead. So at the end of the school year, when it's springtime and it's been open for a while, spring has been open for a while, then I'll bring in some pond water and we'll look at it at the end of the school year. But it's got some really cool stuff. So you're going to summarize the role of microorganisms in both maintaining if I can spell that, maintaining and disrupting the health of organisms. And I'm going to put ... because I'm leaving some stuff out. Isn't it wet? Yeah, it is in the ecosystem, but we've already talked about the ecosystem. So we're just going to focus on organisms here. So summarize the role of microorganisms in both maintaining and disrupting the health of the organism. So this is the one we're more familiar with. What you need to realize, though, first and foremost, is right here, microorganisms. And these are just microscopic. That's all it means. And the most common, you guys said, were bacteria. Most common bacteria and protists. Those are two of our kingdoms we talk about, protists and bacteria. But I'm going to throw in fungi. Remember, the vast majority of fungi are multicellular, but we have a couple of exceptions that are unicellular. Fungi, and then we also have some algae. Some algae are protists, some are plants, but we have a few algae that are in there that are really small like that. Notice viruses are not in here. Viruses are different from bacteria. Why aren't the viruses in here? Because they're not organisms. Viruses are not alive. Remember, in order to be alive, something has to be able to move, grow, reproduce, eat, require energy, get rid of waste. Yeah. The only reason we kind of think about them and think, well, are they alive? Is simply because they have some genetic material. They either have DNA or RNA. Nothing else on the planet except living organisms has DNA or RNA except the virus. So people are like, is it alive? Is it not alive? But if you go through the list of this is how we know something's alive, the virus isn't alive. It's got the DNA. That's it. It's got the DNA. They get brushed around, you pick them up, move them around with your hands, you blow them with your, you sneeze them out, whatever. They have to be moved around by something. Yeah, they can't move on their own at all. So the viruses are not in here. They are not organisms, they're not living things. Can they still cause problems? Yeah, pick up that mask you're wearing. They can cause a lot of problems, all sorts of things going on here. It doesn't mean that they're not important, it just means that they're not microorganisms, so that's why we're not discussing it here. Now we will talk about viruses a little bit later when we talk about cells, but at this moment we're just focused on organisms. So what we're going to do right now is going to make a T chart here. So just drop down and make yourself a T-chart.
All the way down or just kind of like?
About halfway. So on one side we're going to put maintaining. And on the other side, I should have made this bigger. I think I'll make it more over here. I'm making my line different here. I gotta wipe it out and clean it off, but there we go. Here, I'm gonna get rid of my line. There. Makes me happier. Okay, so I'm gonna get a pretty color. Let's get a pretty purple color. And let's talk about maintaining. How does it maintain the health of the environment? Okay, so first and foremost, it aids in the breakdown of some foods. That's a good thing. It aids in breakdown of some food. Digestion, breaking down. And again, don't just focus on humans. It's going to be more than humans. Specifically, what we're talking about here are your gut bacteria. You guys have heard of these? Gut bacteria. When we say gut, that's actually a scientific word, believe it or not. It's one of those, ones like hair. Zarius, wake up. Yeah, you're getting too comfortable. Don't get so comfortable. So when we look at this, do you need to go to the nurse? You sure? Okay. So when we look at this, when we talk about the gut, think of your intestines. Okay, think of inside the intestines. That's what we're focused on. So we have gut bacteria. You have flora and fauna that we talk about in your gut. And your gut health, they found out in the last several years, is really important, not only just to whether or not your stomach hurts or not, but all to the health of all the rest of your systems too. How well you can think during the daytime, how alert you are, things like that can be associated with this. So it aids in the breakdown of some foods. You guys have heard of E. coli?
Yeah, it's in that bread. Like
yeah. You're thinking yeast in there. Yeah. So E. coli would be something that's in your lower intestine, large intestine. So when we talk about E. coli, you can have too much E. coli, you can have too little E. coli. If you have too much E. coli, it's going to cause a big problem. You can die from that. If you have too little E. coli, it's going to cause a problem too. If you have just the right amount, remember we talked about homeostasis, how it's that kind of a dynamic equilibrium that you stand on one foot and it just kind of balances, but it's constantly moving. That's what we have going on here with the gut. You have to have a certain population of the gut bacteria that are in there. It's not ever perfectly still. It's always up and down, but you have a nice steady balance of it. If you don't have diarrhea or constipation, then your gut bacteria are in a nice steady homeostasis. They're in a dynamic equilibrium. They're balanced out. Everything's healthy. When you have diarrhea, when you have constipation, you know something's wrong there. Okay, and one of the easiest ways to deal with that is to get that gut bacteria to get it balanced again. There are medications that we use, all sorts of stuff to deal with that, but that's really what we want to focus on because they help a lot in that. You can actually have, the reason you go into restaurants and you see signs that say employees must wash their hands before you come back, first of all, it's just good hygiene, right? One of the big deals in restaurants is an E. coli outbreak. E. coli is in your feces, okay? You normally have small amounts in your gut cavity, and it stays in your gut cavity, but some of it get out in your feces every time you go to the restroom. If someone doesn't wash their hands and they're disgusting, then they can get that on their hands. They go back in and make you food, then they can get that into the foods that are there. So that's why they're saying, hey, wash your hands, because you can have too much E. coli, and it can cause major problems and even death. Okay? So we have to have this. It's really helpful to us, but we also have on this other side over here where we talk about things, where we talk about it being disruptive. And over here, number one way they can be disruptive is they cause disease, right? There's a balance, not too little, not too much. You have a nice healthy balance and things work really well. There are some organisms that have evolved to rely on that. Think cattle. Okay, think cows. So cows eat grass, and they get all sorts of energy. They can grow to 1,000, a ton or more in their weight. So grass is it's got a lot of energy in it, right? Can you eat grass and survive? No, why not? Okay, you get 0 calories out of it. 0 calories. Calories, that's your energy. You're talking about sugar, right? If you go out and get a handful of grass and eat it, it's going to go in your mouth and out your anus after about 24 hours. You get nothing from it. Nothing at all. Okay? However, you take that same grass and you cook it, and then you eat it, you can get all the calories out of it. Okay? Well, we humans are smart enough to figure out that, hey, if we can break down that cellulose, the plant cell walls, with heat, then we can get the calories out of it. Cows can't cook their food, can they? So they have evolved over time so that they have specialized gut bacteria that break down the cellulose for them. It takes a lot of energy, so they have the bacteria, and then they have the 4 stomachs, and so they eat the food, they bring it back up, and they chew on their cud, and they do that 4 stomachs to deal with this, just to deal with grasses. So it's really tough material to deal with. Do you need to stand up back there? Then what? No. Lay your head down at home, not here. Okay. So when you're doing this stuff, when you're dealing with these cattle and stuff, they can't cook their food at all. They have to be able to have some other method of dealing with all that cellulose. And cellulose is tough material. That paper that you're writing on, that you're laying your head down on, is made of cellulose. You can eat that paper and you're not going to get any calories out of it. We figured out early on to cook the green stuff, and that's how we can break it down. Think about, the green leaves in your salad, the dark green leaves of spinach. You can have spinach that's raw like that, and you can eat it and you get 0 calories from it. That's why we eat salads a lot of times. We want to eat and feel full, but we don't want the calories, so if your body doesn't get the calories from the food, it'll go to its storage of fat and start taking the fat that it's stored for later use and eat that. So that's what it's going to do there. If we take that same spinach leaf and cook it, you can tell it doesn't look the same at all. The cellulose is broken down by the heat, and then when we eat it, we get all the energy, all the calories out of it at all. Right, Andrew? Focus. Okay. So when you're looking at this, we have bacteria that help maintain the breakdown of some different foods inside of our gut cavities. We also have bacteria that protects against the establishment of harmful bacteria. So, and this should make sense to you. If you already have an established population of bacteria, they're already dealing with they're taking up all of the resources, right? You try and establish a new colony in there, there's not enough food for it, is there? So when you have all these healthy bacteria that you need, then having that healthy set of bacteria leaves not enough room for any harmful bacteria to come in. So one of the good things about having bacteria in your system is that it's got its own niche, its own little place to use the food and live, and it keeps that place occupied, so harmful bacteria have no place to come in and live when they try and get in your system. There are some bacteria that synthesize vitamins. What's synthesize? They make them? They actually make them. They synthesize vitamins. There are, and remember that we're talking about microorganisms, so not all of them are bacteria. Remember that there are some fungi, not all. There are some fungi that produce chemicals that are deadly to bacteria. What's that chemical called? What are those chemicals called? Starts with an A. You have probably taken some when you've been sick before. Antibiotics. Antibiotics. What was the antibiotic that was found first? The oldest one. Penicillin. Vitamins, yeah. All right, so, and again, that was just found by accident. Dr. Fleming was working in his lab, and he was growing bacteria, blah, 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 and he's going on vacation, so he just tosses stuff in the sink and doesn't wash it. He comes back a couple weeks later, and the bacteria that he was growing, there's also some mold growing in there, bread mold. Like, apparently the guy threw some bread in around it, too. He was a slob. So he had this mold growing, and everywhere this bread mold was growing, the bacteria died off around it. something the bread mold was making was killing the bacteria. So he discovered penicillin. It took him quite a while, quite a bit longer to actually pull it out and actually be able to use it on humans, but he's the one who discovered it just accidentally. And it's just that some fungi, not all of them, some fungi will produce a chemical that's deadly to bacteria because it takes it's moving them out of the way so it can grow, right? That's what it does here. Are any of you guys allergic to some antibiotics? Nobody? You're not allergic to penicillin? That's pretty awesome. They have, for those of you who are allergic, then they have to have others. There are different types of antibiotics now. They're still, originally they were made by fungi, but there are different kinds of them. And then they can make some in the lab, but they found different families of them. Some people are allergic to this type, but not the other type, and so on and so on. And not all antibiotics work the same way. Like, I had a cavity, and it was underneath, I have terrible teeth. It was underneath the bridge back here, and so it couldn't get out, so it became an abscess. And so they tried to give me I'm allergic to antibiotics. I'm allergic to a lot of them. And so they tried this new antibiotic that was great for tooth cavities, but it was terrible for other stuff. But I took it for about 2 days and then just started swelling up and getting itchy and doing really weird stuff. And so they tried to give me a different kind, and it's something they couldn't do. They couldn't find one that I wasn't allergic to. And they said, look, you're just going to have to let your body try and heal from this before we can do anything about it. So it's, a couple of days of the heavy-duty antibiotics before I had to stop them, I guess worked pretty good. But not all antibiotics are equal. Some of them are great for if you have tooth pain, an abscess. Some of them are great for if you have a bacterial infection of some certain kind, but they're not good for everything. When you take antibiotics, how important is it to make sure that you take the whole jar, the whole medication? That's incredibly important. Why?
Because it won't kill all of them, there'll still be some left and they'll like to adapt.
Okay, so when you take those antibiotics, the organisms that you kill off first are the weakest ones, right? Does that make sense? And as you take them, you're going to start to feel better. Go through and let's say you've got 5 of those antibiotic pills left over. If you stop taking those, you have not killed all the bacteria. You've left the strongest ones alive. And you can pass those on. And when you leave the strongest ones alive, they're the ones that are going to keep growing. They become, yeah, it is exactly like natural selection. You've created some antibiotic resistant bacteria. They resisted the antibiotics up until that time. If you had taken the whole set of them, it would have killed those off too.
What if there's like some that still survive?
There are, and that's why today we're having a huge problem with finding have you heard of the super germs? Super germs, where we don't have any antibiotics to kill those bacteria. Right now, at this point, the last thing, and it's been about 2 years since I read about it, we had one antibiotic that could kill all of the super germs that were out there, but that was 2 years ago, and it was borderline. And again, a lot of people can't take those because there's some really harsh antibiotics out there. So doing the little things like making sure that you take all of the antibiotics through there, even though you feel better, continue to take them, that's incredibly important to do. And when people don't do that, it's really bad. Another thing that's really bad is for a time there, and it still works up to a point, if you give animals like cattle antibiotics just regularly, they grow bigger. The problem with that is we end up having a lot of antibiotics in the urine, in the water system, things like that, and the bacteria become immune to them. And so we are creating more resistant bacteria that way. So there's got to be somehow you've got to look at that and say, okay, we've got to kind of think about this and balance it out there. Okay, so go ahead and set those aside. Hang on, where did I stop capture? There it is.